Welcome into the Cinema Literature Podcast. This episode is a little late, a couple days late, because my internet was out for a couple days because somebody in our apartment building thought it would be a good idea to download Game of Thrones. So internet was cut out. Here's what happened this week in the movie TV world. Probably the biggest story to come out this week was Ed Skrein left the Hellboy movie over whitewashing controversy. If you don't remember Ed Skrein, he played the villain in the Deadpool movie. For Hellboy, he was going to play Ben Daimio, who is of Japanese-American descent. And he originally said he didn't know the character was a minority when he signed on, which is, I don't know if I totally believe that. The guy's name is Ben Daimio. What did you think? Who'd you think he was going to be? But he also said it was the actor's responsibility to make a choice about certain roles, which is pretty noteworthy because Ed Skrein isn't an A-list actor, and he probably doesn't have roles offered to him very often. So, I think that's a pretty good thing that he did. But he also made a good point about, the actors being responsible because people blame studios, but actors do accept those jobs. And both are at fault, but it's like nobody, I don't see how many actors are thrown under the bus for that. Because when Scarlett Johansson accepted the role for Ghost in the Shell, she was pretty quiet about it. She didn't really address it necessarily. And the studio basically kind of said that the way that they were doing it, that was the only way to get the movie made, was get someone of Scarlett Johansson's caliber to play the character. Which is fine, but you're having her play a naturally Japanese character, and the movie was taking place in Japan for Ghost in the Shell, when you could have just made an American version of it. But I think he definitely made a great part about, actors do have to take responsibility for this. And in the Hellboy producers now, they said, well, we're going to get someone who more, culturally represents this character. It's like, well, I don't understand why you couldn't start out by doing that. And I don't see why this happening has to make you do that. But now, thanks to Ed Skrein, they're hopefully going to cast someone who's accurate to the character's culture. But also, if you really wanted Ed Skrein, just create your own character. Create an original character that's not based on somebody from the comics, and then just cast Ed Skrein. Then you can basically avoid a controversy. But, hey, I'm not the producer. The Robin Hood origin movie moves to September 21st, 2018 from their original March release date. This is a pretty smart move because this Robin Hood movie that they're going to make is going to be a pretty high budget movie, and not many high profile movies come out in September, so they can take advantage of that dumping ground where there's not a lot of, high profile movies, and so they could just, every weekend, people are just going to keep seeing Robin Hood if nothing good comes out. But also, this is what Star Trek Beyond should have done in 2016. Come out in September instead of July. In Star Trek Beyond, they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, which aired in 1966, in September. And they decided to put the movie in July, and the movie, I think, made about $355 million on a $185 million budget. So the movie, I think the movie lost a little bit of money. Reports keep saying it broke even, but now they're kind of reevaluating that franchise, and the next movie is going to have a lower budget, and they got Chris Hemsworth to come back from his bit part as Kirk's father in the first movie. So them coming out in September, that's smart. The movie's going to be directed by Otto Bathurst, this is going to be his first feature film, I'm pretty sure, but he's directed episodes of Peaky Blinders, and he directed the first episode of Black Mirror. So with his television credits, he seems like a pretty good director, and that seems promising. But one of the frequent directors of Sherlock, this guy Paul McGuigan, he directed a lot of Sherlock episodes, but he also directed Victor Frankenstein, which came out a couple years ago in the fall, which was pretty awful. And he also directed this movie Push with Chris Evans, where Chris Evans is like this pseudo superhero. It was this low budget kind of. I remember renting it from Blockbuster one time. It was pretty awful. But it will be written by Peter Craig, who's co-writer of The Town, and this guy Joby Harold, who co-wrote King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. And that's probably the biggest red flag about this movie, is that you guys got the co-writer of King Arthur, this movie that lost $175 million earlier this year, to co-write this movie. That's just kind of one red flag. But also, I'm not a fan of this larger scope for Robin Hood, because Lionsgate literally came out and said, before this movie went into production, they came out and said they want to create their own Robin Hood universe. Like a Marvel universe, like a DC universe, they want to create their own Robin Hood one, which is just stupid. honestly, if you want to have a bunch of Robin Hood movies, they don't need to be $150 million movies. The movie starring Taron Egerton from Kingsman, Jamie Foxx, Jamie Dornan, and Ben Mendelsohn. It could be fine, but I'm expecting a Guy Ritchie-esque movie, and hopefully they can do Guy Ritchie well, and not like a bad Guy Ritchie movie. It could be all right, but I think the movie's definitely going to make money by moving to September. The trailer came out for Mark Felt, the man who brought down the White House, and Liam Neeson's going to be playing Mark Felt. Mark Felt was the informant basically for the Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein when they broke a story about the Nixon Watergate scandal and everything. He was the main informant inside the FBI. And Liam Neeson is going to be playing him. And my biggest thing is, stop casting Liam Neeson as an American, okay? The dude is Irish. His Irish accent is way too thick, and you can tell from the trailer he's not American. He tries, and good for him on trying, but he's not an American, and they need to stop. It's like casting Gerard Butler as an American. You can still hear his accent, And this is supposed to be from Felt's point of view when he decided to become a whistleblower about the Nixon administration. The movie looks well made, but the trailer it does not compel me to go see that movie at all. One, because it really looks like the director, Peter Landesman, who did Concussion, and he also directed Parkland, which is about the JFK assassination. It looks like he's trying to mimic Clint Eastwood. It's this super dead gray color palette, and it looks like Clint Eastwood's J. Edgar. And that movie isn't very good either. But that's literally what it looks like. I've only seen, what this guy's directed, I've only seen Concussion, and Concussion is a well-shot movie, but honestly, it's pretty poorly executed, and it looks like this movie will be too. And part of that could be they were fearing an NFL lawsuit with Concussion. I'm not sure. I don't know the deep, dark secrets of production. But the ending of this trailer is pretty hilarious, and unintentionally, because Bob Woodward is basically, I'm pretty sure it's Bob Woodward because it's his informant, but the dude who plays Bob Woodward looks like Bernstein. And he says how, hey, we've got a name for you at the paper. And then it's like there's this pause, and then he says Deep Throat, and then bam, it's like smash cuts to black, and that's the end of the trailer. It's like, that's stupid. It'll probably be okay, but that trailer I just wasn't a fan of that trailer. But I think it releases later this fall, and I think they're trying to push it as an Oscar movie, and that's just not, it's not going to happen. If you want to watch a movie about Watergate, about the scandal, watch All the President's Men. Just watch that movie. This movie could be okay, but I guarantee it won't compare to All the President's Men. The Game of Thrones Season 7 finale drew 16.5 million viewers, which basically makes it the biggest show on TV. It surpassed The Walking Dead, which is actually on regular cable, seeing that HBO is premium cable. And for a comparison, The Sopranos reached 13.43 million viewers at its height, and I think that's what it was for the series finale. That was just the season 7 finale. That wasn't the series finale. So my biggest question is, could it reach 20 million viewers by the time the final season airs in 2018 or more likely 2019? Could it get there? And I think that'd be insane if it got to 20 million viewers on a premium cable channel like HBO. I mean, I think that just tells you how big the Game of Thrones reach is and just how popular that show got. So Joss Whedon got a writing credit for Justice League. It was made official this past week that he's going to have a screenwriting credit, and it kind of tells me how much has been changed. There were reports that the reshoots were going to be extensive, and there was over $35 million in reshoots, and I think Joss Whedon's cut is going to be very different from Zack Snyder's cut. The WGA, the Writers Guild of America, stipulates that a writer who rewrites a script, they get a credit when they change at least a third of the script. And I honestly think Joss Whedon has changed more than that. And my last question becomes, is this going to be a $300 million movie? Just production costs, because, you go back to Batman v Superman, that was $250 million. And with this having over $35 million in reshoots added on to that, this could be a $300 million movie before marketing and everything. So it'll be interesting to look forward to, but I think it's definitely going to be a different movie than what it once was with Zack Snyder at the helm. Spider-Man Homecoming Screenwriting Duo Chris McKenna and Eric Sommers will return to write the sequel. Spider-Man Homecoming, it was originally written by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, and then it went through a bunch of writers. There are actually 6 credited writers on the movie, including McKenna and Sommers, but there were probably more writers to be on it. Actually, those were just the ones that were credited. They more than likely improved the product because the original writers, John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, wrote Vacation, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, and both Horrible Bosses movies. I do like the first Horrible Bosses movies, but I think everyone can agree that the second one was a step down. It's definitely nice to see them back. I definitely like how Marvel is incorporating a lot of these community writers or directors, because Joe and Anthony Russo, the guys who directed Captain America Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War, and they're also directing the Infinity War movies, like they directed a lot of episodes of Community. Chris McKenna was a writer on Community. I know Dan Harmon was credited on Doctor Strange. He created Community, and Community is one of my favorite shows, and I think it just shows, hey, they're just getting guys with talent, and able to punch up some jokes in their movies. So it's nice to see that they'll be back. Hopefully they're the only credited writers on that movie, so it's just them, and it doesn't feel like a bunch of people just put their ideas in and they kind of all just put it together in one big pot. But I definitely like that they're coming back to write the sequel. Blade Runner 2049 Runtime was revealed by the director, Denis Villeneuve, and it turns out this movie is going to be 2 hours and 32 minutes. It's okay, so it's 2.5 hours, which probably means, the director, he basically had carte blanche. Like, he basically got to do whatever he wanted. That's what it sounds like, at least. But my big question is this movie going to make money? I mean, ever since Ridley Scott made The Martian, he's kind of been able to do whatever he wants, in a way. I mean, he's a producer on this movie, and I'm pretty sure that's the main reason why it got made. And I know, with Ridley Scott, he's made the 2 Alien prequels, and he basically prevented Neil Blomkamp, who directed District 9, he prevented him from directing Alien 5. And now those Alien prequels are being reevaluated because they're not making, crazy money. But back to Blade Runner 2049, it's rated R. I'm pretty sure it's going to be over $100 million movie. And now it's 2.5 hours long. There are fans of Blade Runner, but the original movie that came out in 1982 made $34 million against a $28 million budget. And I want to see it, but will the masses want to see it? Will the general audiences want to see this movie? Because how many rated R movies with the budget of over $100 million have made crazy money? I mean, the only ones that really come to mind are like the Matrix sequels, and I mean, I guess Logan, because Logan was $100 million. Well, it was $97 million, but it was $100 million, and it made over $600 million. But yeah, there aren't that many. I mean, there's Passion of the Christ, but that wasn't a $100 million movie. That was like a $50 million movie. So I think it's a pretty big gamble, but it's a sequel, so it got approved. Anything that's based on IP or is a sequel, if it's good, or if it makes money, and if it's good, it'll get a sequel. So I don't know. This movie, it might lose money, but I don't think that matters in the grand scheme of things, because I don't think they have a third one planned. So Ben Affleck is in talks to direct Sony's Afghanistan war movie Red Platoon. Synopsis is, in 2009, Clinton Romisha of Red Platoon and the rest of the Black Knight Troop were preparing to shut down Command Outpost Keating, the most remote and inaccessible in a string of bases built by the U.S. military in Nuristan and Kunar, in the hope of preventing Taliban insurgents from moving freely back and forth between Afghanistan and Pakistan. 3 years after its construction, the army was finally ready to concede what the men on the ground had known immediately. It was simply too isolated and too dangerous to defend. On October 3rd, 2009, after years of constant smaller attacks, the Taliban finally decided to throw everything they had at Keating. The ensuing 14-hour battle and eventual victory cost 8 men their lives. Red Platoon is a riveting first-hand account of the Battle of Keating, told by Romisha, who spearheaded both the defense of the outpost and the counterattack that drove the Taliban back beyond the wire and received the Medal of Honor for his actions. About this movie, it's interesting that Affleck is going to go to Sony after directing his first 4 films for Warner Brothers. And I doubt Warner Brothers is nervous about Affleck after Live by Night had a below-average critical reception, and it also lost the studio $75 million. But it is possible that Warner Brothers, maybe there was some pushback against Ben Affleck and whatever his next project was going to be. maybe it wasn't this movie. It was probably a Warner Brothers thing, and maybe there was some pushback because his last movie didn't do well. I hope not, but I think Warner Brothers has shown that they're very reactionary about their projects, especially with all the DC films. So, but I think Ben Affleck, he just saw a project with a ton of potential like this, and Sony had the rights to the story, so he jumped on board with Sony. And I think also he does want to keep expanding a little bit, and he wants to direct a war film, especially with war films kind of making this comeback a little bit, with movies like Lone Survivor, American Sniper, Dunkirk, and now, he wants to direct, this Afghanistan war movie. Supposedly Casey Affleck is being eyed for a lead role, and it would be the first time Ben would direct his brother since Gone Baby Gone, which I highly recommend Gone Baby Gone if you haven't seen it. But also that would mean 2 Oscar winners, with Casey Affleck winning Best Actor and Ben being both a screenwriting and producing winner, because he wasn't nominated for Best Director for Argo, which is pretty crazy. But it'll be interesting how this develops over the next few years, and it'll also be interesting if this goes well, will Ben Affleck start to work with Sony more rather than Warner Brothers. Damien Chazelle heads to Netflix with musical television series The Eddy. Chazelle was developing this music-centric television series set in contemporary multicultural Paris, and now Netflix has announced that it has scooped the project up and added it to its growing slate of original series. Scripted by Harry Potter and the Cursed Child playwright and Star Wars Episode 9 writer Jack Thorne, The Eddy is a drama series that revolves around a Paris club, its owner, the house band, and the chaotic city that surrounds them. The first season will consist of 8 episodes in total, with Chazelle directing 2 of them and serving as executive producer alongside Thorne. 6-time Grammy winner Glenn Ballard will write the original music for the series. This sounds pretty great on all sides. I mean, after Whiplash and La La Land, I will basically watch anything Damien Chazelle writes and directs. I haven't seen his Harvard thesis film. I think it's called Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench. I think you can watch it on YouTube, actually, but I do want to see that eventually. The writer, Jack Thorne, is a name that keeps popping up in a lot of projects, and ever since he was announced as a co-writer or a rewriter on Star Wars Episode 9, ever since he was announced that, people have been looking into his work, and honestly, if Episode 9 is good, I mean, his stock is going to go through the roof, because with Colin Trevorrow and Derek Connolly originally working on that script, people didn't have a lot of faith in that script, and so I think people, if Star Wars Episode 9 is good, I think people are going to attribute that a lot to Jack Thorne. But I think this is a unique television series because I don't know of a television series that would focus on a house band in Paris for like hour-long. I'm pretty sure it's hour-long episodes. But I think Chazelle is there. He's probably going to direct the first 2 episodes to set the overall tone for the show. And then he's probably just going to serve as an executive producer for like future seasons or whatever. It doesn't say if it's just 1 season or if it's going to be multiple seasons, but it's definitely something. Once it premieres, I'm definitely going to want to watch that the weekend it comes out. My only question is, I feel like this could be another expensive show for Netflix because it takes place in Paris. It's about this house band. It's a musical show, so that's more people you have to hire and everything. So, along with directing and writing, you have to have people writing musical arrangements, and I don't know if it's a musical in the sense that people are going to be singing like spontaneously to move plot forward, or if it's just only a musical because it is about a musical. It's about characters who play instruments. Warner Brothers wants Leonardo DiCaprio for their Joker origin movie. Just because you have Martin Scorsese attached to the project, by the way, Scorsese hasn't even really officially signed on yet, but just because you have him attached to the project does not mean you're gonna get DiCaprio as the Joker. Because Leonardo DiCaprio has been avoiding big genre movies for a while. Like, he was initially, Sony wanted him to be Spider-Man in 2002. He said no, but he did recommend his friend Tobey Maguire to be Spider-Man. And supposedly they zeroed in on DiCaprio to be in the Star Wars prequels to play Anakin. And he said no. But Warner Brothers believes that if they have Scorsese, then they have this in to get Leonardo DiCaprio. And another thing, if this is supposed to be an origin movie, Leonardo DiCaprio is 42. Like, I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's like you want a 42-year-old to play the guy who becomes the Joker. So it could. First of all, he's not going to sign on, but if he does, cool. I think that's a cool get, and it'll be interesting to see Leonardo DiCaprio play that role. but I don't think he's gonna. He's attached to so many projects as it is, and he's producing a lot of stuff that he's in now in order to get more money, basically. But I mean, and also some of the buzzwords for the Joker origin movie is like, oh, they want to do this dark, gritty, grounded, which they might want to, but they only use those words because people love the Dark Knight trilogy. How many movies that were in development that came out after the Dark Knight trilogy would use those same words of, we're going to do this dark, gritty take on such and such and such and such, and it's like just because not every genre movie since the Dark Knight trilogy has to be dark and gritty. It just worked for that movie. It worked for Batman. That was probably a problem people had with Man of Steel, is that Man of Steel was dark, gritty, and grounded, and it's like, okay, that doesn't really fit Superman as a character. You can apply it and maybe have it work, but it just might feel out of place. So, and I think that's what they wanted to do with like the newer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it's just like, it works for certain movies if you know how to apply that style to the characters, but they're just using that because they know people will automatically think of, oh, the Dark Knight was like that, so, and that was good, so it worked for this. But as far as Leonardo DiCaprio, he's not going to be in it. I really don't think he's going to be in it. Even if Scorsese does sign on as the official executive producer, I don't think it's going to happen. True Detective Season 3 is officially confirmed, with director Jeremy Saulnier directing the entire third season. The synopsis is, Season 3 of True Detective will tell the story of a macabre crime in the heart of the Ozarks, and a mystery that deepens over decades and plays out in 3 separate time periods. Mahershala Ali will play the lead role of Wayne Hayes, a state police detective from Northwest Arkansas. As far as the director, Jeremy Saulnier, he has directed Blue Ruin, which has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 77 on Metacritic. And he has directed Green Room, which has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 79 on Metacritic. So he's going to direct every episode, just like the first season with Cary Fukunaga, when he directed the entire first season. It's also interesting that this will take place in the Ozarks after the premiere of Ozark on Netflix, and I wonder how similar or different it might be. But I mean, it's not plagiarism or anything, because Nick Pizzolatto, the guy who directed, or the guy who wrote all the scripts, probably wrote this way before Ozark even came out. But also, I think Season 3 will be a return to form for True Detective, like Season 1, because Nick Pizzolatto, who is both the head writer and the showrunner, and he normally writes all the scripts, he was given time to kind of develop the storyline instead of just this 1-year turnaround. By the time this premieres, it will have been 3 years since the last True Detective season. And they're going back to a single director so they can have like one vision, or one combined vision for the season. But they said Season 3 is probably going to film this fall, which actually more than likely means that Game of Thrones Season 8 won't air until 2019, because Westworld is going to be back spring 2018, taking over the old Game of Thrones slot in April. And then Season 3 of True Detective will probably take the fall slot, and then they're going to delay Game of Thrones till 2019, most likely, because I don't think they're going to want Game of Thrones up against Sunday Night Football. Because as popular as Game of Thrones is, Game of Thrones will probably lose that battle. But I'm pretty interested in seeing True Detective Season 3. I do have to finish True Detective Season 1, but so far it's very good. And I might just skip True Detective Season 2, to be honest, with everything I heard about it. Before I go, I want to recommend a couple of movies. First movie is Friday, which came out in 1995. Pretty sure that this was the first rated R movie I ever saw. But Friday stars Ice Cube and Chris Tucker. The film details roughly 16 hours in the lives of unemployed Craig Jones, played by Ice Cube, and Smokey, who must pay a drug dealer $200 by 10 o'clock that night. Basically, the reason why I love Friday is because it is a very specific story in a way, where it's just about these two guys on their front porch in South Central Los Angeles who have to deal with basically their neighborhood. It's like they run into the neighborhood bully, the neighborhood crack addict, the neighborhood drug dealer, the neighborhood priest, and it's basically there's just a day in the lives of the neighborhood, just one where they kind of have to meet this deadline or be killed. It's almost like this very minor thing. It's like this very minor setting for this very major conclusion, or this very major conflict, I should say. And basically, it's at the end of the day, it's more about taking responsibility for your F-ups, basically, for everything you mess up. It's kind of about taking responsibility for that. And I think it teaches a pretty good lesson. And it's really funny, and it's super quotable. Like, if you haven't seen Friday, I guarantee that when you do watch it and you hear all the quotes, you're going to be like, oh my god, so that's from this movie. But, yeah, definitely go see Friday. And don't worry about the sequels. You don't have to see next Friday or Friday after next. Just stick with the first one. The next movie I want to recommend is Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which is a parody of Walk the Line. It's basically a parody of biopics and musical biopics in particular, and just nails it by going all the way. Like, it does not go halfway. It goes for it. And there's a great soundtrack there, these great original songs. And Dewey Cox is played by John C. Reilly, who is amazing in the movie. He was nominated for a Golden Globe, actually. But it's amazing because, one, you actually kind of care about the characters, and to me, I think it's better than Walk the Line. I know it's a parody of it, but I do think it's better. And it so nails all the tropes. Like, there's this one scene, this happens at the beginning of the movie, this really isn't a big spoiler, but he's coming up, he's trying to be famous, he's working hard, and he's at his first recording session, and basically he is found by these music producers who are Jewish, which is, again, a kind of a trope, but they're like Hasidic Jews. And the guy who's listening to him sing, who's played by John Michael Higgins, one of my favorite actors, he basically goes like, that is a terrible, terrible song. You have failed conclusively. And there's nothing you can do to change my mind. And he's playing with this band that he's never met. And he's like, but if somehow, some way, you can bring together these boys you've never even met, and bring back music in a way that it's never been done before. But let me tell you, son, I don't think it's going to happen. And let me tell you, you have shaken my faith in the Jewish people. And basically, like, he says, they try and, like, say, just give me one more chance. And he goes, all right, son, I'll give you 15 more seconds. And sure enough, he has this song that he wrote himself, and literally 4 seconds into the song, the producer turns around and is like, I think this kid will make it. But it is so funny. It'll be one of your favorite comedies by the time you're done watching it. Well, that's the show. So if you want to get in touch with Cinema Literature and ask us questions about some of your favorite movies, upcoming films, or what goes into making a movie, feel free to comment on our YouTube channel or on our website, cinemalit.weebly.com. You can also email us at cinemalit52814@gmail.com. If you want to keep up with the podcast, rate, review, and subscribe to Cinema Literature on iTunes. Like us on YouTube and follow us on Twitter, simply @CinemaLit. Peace.